The recording now. Cool. And I'm going to talk about what goes into a memoir and kind of help you guys out with this here for the next couple of minutes, but it'll be somewhat interactive. And so there's three things I'm looking for in this memoirs. Um, well, first of all, let me kind of give you a definition if I kind of go back to my previous slide. A memoir is it's a memory. It's where you write about something that happened to you. Okay, so if you're taking notes right now, um, it's a memory of something that happened that changed who you are or had a big impact on you. Um, and usually, almost always, it should be you want to focus on an event rather than a whole time period. Okay, because you can get too broad if you do that. If you try to do a memoir on all of your um, high school years or something, that's too broad. But if you did a memoir on something that happened the summer that you turned 18, or something that happened last year, an event that happened, maybe it was somebody that passed away, maybe it was a wedding that was really joyful, maybe it was a time that you learn for the first time in your life that people don't always follow through or something, or that you can't always depend on people. Or maybe you learned it was a time that you learned that you should really appreciate those you love because they may not always be there. So you see how I'm talking about an event, a specific event, as opposed to a whole long memory of all my childhood. Okay. So that's what a memoir is. And generally it's something that happened, and coupled with that something is, what did I learn from, or how did I grow or change as a person from that experience? Okay. So, um, so anyway, that's what it is. Now, it's not a formal essay in that sense, but I should tell you, make this really clear to you that there are many times in both trying to get into colleges, they'll ask you to write this type of essay about an experience that changed you, a hardship you've gone through, for instance, sometimes, and how it impacted you. Um, and in freshman English classes, many times you'll get an English teacher, you'll learn how to write argumentative essays, but then they'll throw one of these at you where they want you to write about a memoir, about an encounter that changed you, okay? And so I'm going to give you a couple of tips on how to do it well and be successful for me this week and for college in the future, or if you just become a writer, okay? So three things that make memoir writing pretty fun to listen to. I think I just got bit by a mosquito. Excuse me, to have specific detail, lots of specific detail, and then also the use of conversation, and then also the use of personal reflection. What did I learn from this? Reflecting back on what I learned. And so I'll define specific detail. Instead of saying I got angry, if I say I got so mad my face turned red and my voice got hoarse, okay? You see how there's a difference? One's broad and general, and one's more specific. Instead of saying a car stopped and rolled down its window, if I said a blue Chevy van with a Texas license plate and tinted windows stopped and rolled down its window, that's specific. Okay. In life, when you have a memory and a memoir, there were specific details. Tell the details because they're part of what makes writing good, and we'll see that in a second. Conversation, or what they call dialogue, where you put your thoughts and your feelings into the memoir, it makes it more authentic, it makes it more engaging, and it allows the reader to really get inside of your mind better. Okay, those three things happen when you use dialogue and put your feelings in something. If you don't put your feelings into it, then the reader feels like, why should I care about this piece? Because the writer didn't even tell me what they felt in it. Okay, and then there's personal reflection. Okay, and that's where, and we'll take a look at that, and that's where you reflect on how it changed you. So what I want to do now is, first thing I want to do is we're going to look at um, a memoir by Amy Tan. And what I want to start off with is, what do we learn about Amy from her first two lines here? If you can see me in the little video box, her first two lines. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on the screen here and ask, so I'm talking about these two lines right at the top here. So um, um, Ian, if you guys, and Alyssa, if you could in the chat box, if you could type this, put that in there. Let me stop my share for just a second. and allow Monica in. Um, Welcome, Monica. Good to have you. Jasmine's joining us as well. Perfect. Okay, so I've got a couple more joining us. Welcome, guys. We are talking about. I'll have you disconnect your video, Monica. You can just turn it off so that you're not on my recording. Okay. I think you'll feel more comfortable. Just turn off your video if you can figure out. And actually, I might be able to do that for you. Stop video. I think I just did. Okay. Um, so we're talking about the memoir and how to write it. And I think I need somebody to turn off their volume too. Who would that be? That's probably you, Jasmine. Sorry. If you could turn off your mute your microphone, that'd be good. Okay. We're talking about the memoir, okay? And we're going into what goes into that memoir. And we're looking at these first two lines of this memoir by Amy Tam, okay? Um, I want you to think about, read these first two lines and answer this question. I fell in love with the minister's son. In fact, I should just read this whole thing to you real quick. I fell in love with the minister's son when I turned 14. He was not Chinese, but as white as Mary. Oh, my little video thing's in the way here. In a manger. For Christmas, I prayed for this blonde-haired boy, Robert, and a slim new American nose. Okay, so can you guys can you in the chat, can you type in what do we learn in those first two sentences about Amy Tam? Okay, I'm kind of leaving these up on the screen here. If you would like to, in the chat box, click on the chat. What is something we learned? You don't have to tell it all, but just tell me one thing we learned about Amy Tam in the first two sentences. Okay, so if I kind of do that. Let me see if I can. Okay. So I'm going to resume my recording here. So we learned those two things. We learned that with a couple of things. We learned she's Chinese. We learned that she is, she feels she has a crush on this guy. We learned that she feels insecure about her being Chinese. She wishes she had a different nose. Okay. All right. Now, here's another question, kind of an interactive question I want you guys to think about. And you can, in the chat box, you can write answers to this, okay? All right. The things I said I want you to do this thing is I want specific detail, conversation, and personal reflection. Let's take a look at specific detail, okay? Actually, I wanted to read this thing to you, so I'm going to continue on. When I found out that my parents had invited the minister's family over for Christmas Eve dinner, I cried. What would Robert, I got this little box in the way, think of our shabby Chinese Christmas? What would he think of our noisy Chinese relatives who lack proper American manners? What terrible disappointment would he feel upon seeing not a roasted turkey and sweet potatoes, but Chinese food? Okay, do you see how she's insecure? That's coming out. Okay. On Christmas Eve, I saw that my mother had outdone herself in creating a strange menu. Now, as we read these two paragraphs, pay close attention to specific detail, okay? Because I'm going to ask you to type those in the chat box, any specific detail. She was pulling black veins out of the backs of fleshy prawns. The kitchen was littered with appalling mounds of raw food. A slimy rock cod with bulging eyes that pleaded not to be thrown into a pan of hot oil. Tofu, which looked like stacked wedges of rubbery white sponges. A bowl soaking dried fungus back to life. A plate of squid, their backs crisscrossed with knife makings so that they resembled bicycle tires. And then they arrived, the minister's family and all of my relatives, in a clamor of doorbells and rumpled Christmas packages. Robert grunted hello, and I pretended that he was not worthy of existence. Dinner threw me into despair. My relatives, now again, you have to remember she's, 14? And she's got this major crush on this boy named Robert. And she really doesn't want her parents to mess things up, right? In her family, she's kind of embarrassed that she's Chinese, wants them to make a good impression. But and that's the setting, that's the situation. Right here I am. My relatives licked the ends of their chopsticks and reached across the table, dipping them into a dozen or so plates of food. Robert and his family waited patiently for platters to be passed to them. My relatives murmured with pleasure when my mother brought out the whole steamed fish. Robert grimaced. Then my father poked his chopsticks just below the fish eye and plucked out the soft meat. Amy, your favorite, he said, offering me the tender fish cheek. I wanted to disappear. At the end of the meal, my father leaned back and belched loudly, thanking my mother for her fine cooking. It's a polite Chinese custom to show you are satisfied, explained my father to our astonished guests. Robert was looking down at his plate with a reddened face. The minister managed to muster up a quiet burp. I, sh- I was stunned into silence for the rest of the night. After everyone had gone, my mother said to me, "You want to be the same as American girls on the outside?" She handed me an early gift. It was a mini skirt in beige tweed. But inside, you must be Chinese. You must be proud you are different. You only shame, your only shame is to have shame. And even though I didn't agree with her then, I knew that she understood how much I had suffered during the evening's dinner. It wasn't until about many years later, long after I had gotten over my crush on Robert, that I was able to fully appreciate her lesson and the true purpose behind our particular menu. For Christmas Eve that year, she had chosen all of my favorite foods. Okay. And so she learns that her mom's trying to teach her, don't be embarrassed about who you are. The only thing that you shame is feeling shame. You need to take pride in who you are as a Chinese person. And she learns this lesson, and she, every year she starts really thinking about the fact that her mom always chose her favorite foods, the really important things, instead of being embarrassed about who she is. So that's this last paragraph is reflecting on that. Okay. All right, so here's what I want to do. I want to jump back into right here on the screen, and I just want you to just see if you can find one or two examples of specific details, okay? What I did is pulled out two or three middle paragraphs from this memoir. Where do you see specific details? If you want to, you can turn on your microphone and you can just speak it out loud, and then turn your microphone back off again. But where do you see examples of specific detail rather than just vague, generally, that we had a whole bunch of Chinese food and it smelled like Chinese food? Okay. Can you think of that? Let me point some out in a minute and let you think. Where do you see specific detail? My thinking is if you can see it and you start becoming familiar with it, then you will start getting better at trying to write like this yourself. Okay, that's why I'm showing you a model. Okay. Um, I'm going to see if you can see my cursor here, pulling what kind of veins out of the black backs of fleshy prawns. She didn't just say she was working on fixing prawns, right? Kitchen was littered with the appalling mounds of raw food. Slimy rock cod with bulging eyes that pleaded, that you could even see the feeling in the cod, pleaded not to be thrown into a pan of hot oil. All of these specific details, a bowl soaking dried fungus back to life, a plate of squid with their backs crisscrossed with knife markings. Do you see the specific use of detail here? It's what makes writing engaging, interesting, and really tells the story. Okay. Um, so I wanted you to kind of see this. Okay. I mean, look down here at this bottom paragraph. My relatives licked the ends of their chopsticks and reached across the table, dipping them into a dozen or so plates of food. You see the specifics again, the details, they're telling the story. Okay. All right, let me jump to another one. What examples of conversation and feelings do you see? Okay. Examples of feelings. If you look at this, look at the first line. Dinner threw me into despair. Okay. Depression, desperate. Okay. Um, and look at this line at the end of this little paragraph. I wanted to disappear. These phrases, it starts the paragraph with her being ashamed, wanting to feeling despair. It ends the paragraph making her want to disappear. You see her feelings. Do you see dialogue there, conversation? Look at here. Amy, it's your favorite, her father said. Now, this is particularly embarrassing because she knew this would be really gross to her guest this poking at the flesh right below the fish eye, okay, the soft meat, okay. And then again, look at this next paragraph. It's a polite Chinese custom to show you're satisfied, explained our father to our astonished guest, okay. I was stunned into silence. Again, you see her feelings coming out here. And again, down here in the bottom, you see more dialogue, more conversation. You want to be the same as American girls on the outside? And but inside you must always be Chinese. You must be proud you are different. Your only shame is to have shame. Okay, you can almost hear her voice talking to her. That makes it more engaging. So that's examples of conversation. That's examples of specific detail. And now I want you to look at this last paragraph is personal reflection. Okay, what does she learn from this? You'll see she says, it wasn't until many years later, long after I had gotten over my crush on Robert, that I was able to fully appreciate her lesson and the true purpose behind our particular menu. For Christmas Eve that year, she had chosen all my favorite foods. Okay, she was trying to love her and trying to do something nice for her, but Amy was missing it because she was so embarrassed, you know. And so this little paragraph, if I go back to the kind of the putting it all together, is the reflection paragraph down here where it's talking about what the person learned from it, okay? So this is an example of what I'm going to ask you to write this week is a memoir, a memory of something that changed you or impacted you. And I want to see these magical things, details, conversation, and reflection, okay? Now, looking at number 2, I want to warn you, however, that be sure and watch the video and take the quiz on how to use dialogue, how to punctuate, use the quotation marks and everything when you're writing a story in what they call narrative writing, where you're telling a story, because it's really important you make it clear who's speaking and that you punctuate it right. And so that I have a short video for you to watch, shows you how to do it. And then there's actually a little quiz on that as well afterwards, okay? Let me show you a couple more things here. Yeah, one more thing. If you're kind of thinking, Tim, how do I start this memoir essay? You know, like how am I going to do this? Organize it. It's not a formal introduction, body, and conclusion 5-paragraph essay. So what exactly is it if I'm telling a story, right? You might think of it like this, okay? Short introduction paragraph, give the setting and the situation, and then maybe even a hint that there was a lesson you learned from this. This taught me an invaluable lesson. Could be even your last sentence of your intro paragraph, okay? This is not a thesis statement, okay? It's just you're telling a story, but you got this kind of short paragraph at the beginning, just like when I go back to here, this little paragraph right here, where we learn a whole bunch of things right real fast. Now, you don't have to do it as quickly and skillfully as Amy Tan did, but you can. So anyway, after that, your body paragraphs, just like if I jump back to this model here, you see how that we have the body paragraphs that are telling the story here. I'm moving my cursor around here. Okay, there where I want to see all of the, I want you to tell the story. You know, it's like you're sitting down at a Starbucks with me and you're saying, hey, this thing happened to me. I got to tell you what happened to me the other day. And a good storyteller uses specific details. They tell you what they were thinking. I couldn't believe it. It made me feel so embarrassed or I was so stressed out because, they tell their emotions and their feelings. That's part of what makes good storytelling. So be sure to do that in the body paragraphs. And then you can have a short conclusion paragraph, just like here in the model here, down at the very end, that kind of reflects on what you learned and how it changed you. Okay. From this, I learned to always appreciate those that I love because you never know when they might not be there. Okay. So that's kind of the outline, and I'll send you this recording if you wanted to take more notes on this page. There's a model we looked at, and this is the story that I want you to read this week. I have a copy of this story called Fish Cheeks in Canvas for this week. So you have it there to read it more slowly if you want to look at it. You'll notice it's not too long. This piece, if you're wondering, Hey, teacher, how long is this going to be? First of all, let me go back to this slide here and look at the bottom here. It's worth 100 points, due on Friday, double space. From here on out, I should have been mentioning this all along, but for all of your writing in school, academic writing, you should always double space, okay? It allows more room for teachers to put comments between the lines and it's easier to read. Um, but so it's worth 100 points, and I think I was going to say something else about it, but now I can't remember what that something else is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my recording, and you can ask questions, those of you that are still here.